Life can feel heavy sometimes, can't it? It's a weight that settles on your shoulders, often without warning. One day you are walking along, feeling the sun on your face, and the next a cloud has rolled in. This weight isn't always something you can see or touch. It's the quiet worry that keeps you awake at night, staring at the ceiling and counting the seconds. It's the ache in your heart from a loss that no one else seems to understand. It's the pressure of expectations, the sting of disappointment, or the slow creeping dread that things might not get better. This is the unseen weight of being human, a burden that we all carry at different times in our lives. It's real, it's valid, and it deserves to be acknowledged. You might be carrying that weight right now. Perhaps it feels like a thick fog has descended, making it hard to see the path ahead. Every step forward feels like a monumental effort, and the idea of a clear sky seems like a distant memory. Maybe you put on a brave face for the world, smiling and nodding in all the right places, while inside you feel like you are crumbling. This is a lonely place to be. It's a place where you can feel completely isolated, even when surrounded by people. The world keeps spinning, everyone else seems to be moving on, but you feel stuck, held down by a force you can't quite name. It's important to know that what you are feeling is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of being alive, of having loved, of having hoped, and of having faced the inevitable storms of existence. Life is a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, triumph and trial. The very capacity to feel deep joy is linked to our capacity to feel deep pain. So if you are hurting, it means your heart is still working. Your struggle is not a failing. It is part of your story, a chapter that is being written in real time. Let's take a moment right here, right now, to simply sit with that feeling. Let's just acknowledge it. Give it a name if you can. Is it grief? Is it fear? Is it exhaustion? Is it confusion? By giving it space, we take away some of its power. We stop fighting it in the dark and bring it into the light. This is the first step. It is the brave and necessary step of admitting this is hard, I am struggling. And in that simple, honest admission, a tiny crack of light begins to appear. In moments of suffering, we believe the lie that we are utterly alone. But the story of human struggle is as old as humanity itself. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. We are all part of this vast, interconnected drama of human life. The emotions you are feeling have been felt across every continent and century. Their stories remind us that we are not alone in our struggles. It is a sign that you are human. It is a part of the universal human condition. It doesn't make the pain disappear, but it makes it less lonely. When life's storms rage, you need an anchor, hope. It's not optimism, but a deeper confidence. Hope acknowledges suffering, yet looks beyond to God. It's trusting even in darkness. Hope is a daily choice to believe in God's goodness. It anchors the soul. The storm continues, but hope keeps you from being swept away. It brings stability and peace amidst chaos. This hope is available to you now. Sometimes, to find our way forward, we must first look back. Stories are powerful. They are maps that illuminate the path. The Bible is filled with accounts of ordinary people who faced extraordinary trials and found hope. We will journey with Job, who lost everything, confronting the question of why good people suffer. Then we'll turn to Joseph, sold into slavery, and see how God weaves redemption through injustice. Finally, we walk with David, facing giants and pouring out his heart to God in the Psalms. These stories are living testimonies to the power of hope and resilience. As we prepare to step into these ancient stories, it's important to understand what we are embarking on. This is not just an academic exercise or a history lesson. This is an invitation. It is an invitation to find your own story within these larger narratives. It is a chance to see your own struggles, your own fears, and your own hopes reflected in the lives of these men and women of faith. The goal is not simply to learn about their resilience, but to discover the source of that resilience and to find how you can draw from that same well of strength for your own journey. This is a journey of the heart, a search for a hope that holds. Throughout this time together, we will not shy away from the hard parts. We will look at the pain, the loss, and the confusion head on. We will acknowledge that the path of faith is often steep and rocky. There will be no easy platitudes or simple one-size-fits-all answers. Life is more complex than that, and your pain deserves more respect than that. Instead, we will seek to uncover the threads of grace that are woven even into the darkest parts of the tapestry. We will look for the evidence of God's presence, not in the absence of trouble, but right in the middle of it. The promise of this journey is not that all your problems will magically disappear. The promise is that you will discover you have the resources to face them. You will be reminded that you are stronger than you think, because the one who is in you is stronger than the one who is in the world. You will find encouragement to take the next step, even if it's a small one. You will be equipped with a new perspective, one that sees challenges not just as obstacles, but as opportunities for God to show His strength in your weakness. The promise is that you will be reminded again and again that you are not walking this road alone. So take a deep breath. Settle in. Open your heart to what God might want to say to you through these stories. Let this be a time of encouragement, a time of strengthening, and a time of renewed hope. The journey ahead may explore ancient paths, but its destination is your present reality. It is about finding unshakable hope and profound resilience right here, right now, in the midst of your life. Let's begin this journey together, with the confident expectation that you will get through this and you will emerge on the other side, not unscathed, but stronger, deeper, and more filled with hope than ever before. Let's travel back to Uz, where we meet Job. The Bible says he was blameless, upright, feared God, and turned from evil. Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He was incredibly wealthy, the greatest man in the East. Job's life seemed perfect, but a storm was brewing. His story forces us to confront a difficult truth. Terrible things happen to good people. The day started like any other ordinary day for Job. The sun rose over his vast lands. Then a messenger arrived, running out of breath. The Sabaean raiders, he gasped, had attacked. The fire of God fell from the heavens, he cried. A third messenger appeared. The Chaldeans, a powerful enemy, had swept in. The final messenger arrived, his clothes torn. A mighty wind had swept in from the desert and struck the house, causing it to collapse. All of them, every single one of his beloved sons and daughters, were gone. It was annihilated. This was a loss beyond comprehension. One moment, Job is the greatest man in the East. The next, he has nothing. You find yourself in a free fall. And in this moment, the whole world watches to see what this blameless man will do next. Job's response to tragedy is one of the most powerful moments in Scripture. He did not curse God or shake his fist at the heavens. Instead, he tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell to the ground in worship. He said, "Naked I came, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave and has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." Even in his darkest hour, Job acknowledged God's sovereignty. Then Job was struck with painful sores. His wife said, "Curse God and die." Job rebuked her, asking if they should only accept good from God and not trouble. He held fast, though the questions surely burned inside him. In the depths of his despair, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him. They made a plan to go and comfort him, to sympathize with him and show him solidarity. This was a noble intention. There is nothing more needed in a time of crisis than the quiet presence of a true friend. They traveled from their homes, and when they saw Job from a distance, he was so changed, so disfigured by his suffering that they barely recognized him. The sight was so shocking that they began to weep aloud, tearing their robes and sprinkling dust on their heads in a shared sign of mourning. Their initial actions were perfect. They came and sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. And in all that time, no one said a word. They simply sat with him in his silent agony. This is often the greatest gift we can give to someone who is hurting. Not our words, not our advice, not our explanations, but our presence. They honored his grief by sharing it, by entering into his silence and refusing to leave him alone in it. For 7 days, they were the very picture of compassionate friendship. They offered the ministry of presence, a powerful testament to their love for him. In that shared silence, Job was not entirely alone. But then, the silence was broken. And when they finally opened their mouths, everything went wrong. After Job finally speaks, giving voice to the immense pain in his heart, his friends feel compelled to respond, to explain, to fix his problem. They operate from the same simple equation that Job himself once held, that blessing comes from righteousness, and suffering comes from sin. Since Job was clearly suffering in a monumental way, they concluded that he must have committed some monumental secret sin to deserve it. They became prosecutors instead of comforters, judges instead of friends. Their words, though perhaps well-intentioned, became like salt in his already gaping wounds. Each friend took a turn, delivering long, eloquent speeches filled with what they believed to be spiritual wisdom. Eliphaz suggested Job must have done something wrong. "Consider now," he said, "who, being innocent, has ever perished." Bildad was even more blunt, suggesting that Job's children had died because they had sinned against God. Zophar insisted that Job's punishment was actually less than his sins deserved. They were trying to defend God, to make sense of the senseless. But in their rush to find an explanation, they completely missed the man in front of them. They were not listening to his pain. They were trying to explain it away. Their comfort became another layer of suffering for Job to endure. After days of silence, Job finally cries out, cursing the day he was born. This is a raw expression of anguish. Job holds nothing back, questioning his existence. He refuses his friend's cruel logic, insisting he is blameless. This creates a crisis of faith. He speaks directly to God, demanding answers. He accuses God of treating him like an enemy. Job dares to voice the questions we are afraid to ask. He would rather argue with God than abandon his faith. This raw honesty is a form of worship. Job gives us permission to be honest with God. Job endures unimaginable suffering, unaware of the cosmic test behind his pain. He's left with no answers. Only his integrity and a fractured faith in a God who seems silent, yet in the darkness Job's faith shines. "I know that my Redeemer lives. Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." Job's faith isn't about having answers, it's about holding on when everything else falls apart. He trusts God's character even when he can't see God's hand. Job's endurance becomes a beacon, showing us that faith can survive even when the reasons for suffering remain hidden. In the face of the unknown, Job's story reminds us, trust can outlast understanding. In Canaan, Joseph, Jacob's favorite son, stands out marked by a special coat and his father's open affection. The coat, a symbol of favor, fuels his brother's jealousy and resentment. Joseph's dreams of his family bowing to him only deepen the rift. Even Jacob is unsettled, but the brother's anger turns to hatred. Joseph, perhaps naive, walks in favor, unaware of the storm brewing at home. Sometimes the greatest threats come from those closest to us. The stage is set for betrayal not by strangers, but by his own family. Sent by his father, Joseph finds his brothers, but their hatred explodes into violence. They strip him of his coat and throw him into a pit, then sell him to passing traders for silver. The brothers deceive Jacob with Joseph's bloodied robe, shattering their father's heart. Joseph, once the favored son, is now a slave bound for Egypt. His dreams seem lost, his life upended by betrayal. The brothers' jealousy has turned to treachery. Jacob mourns. Joseph is led away in chains. The dreamer's journey has only just begun. In Egypt, Joseph is sold to Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard. Despite his circumstances, Joseph chooses faithfulness and integrity. The Lord is with him, and everything he does prospers. Potiphar notices, entrusting Joseph with his entire household. Joseph rises from slave to trusted overseer, blessing Potiphar's house. But new success brings new temptation. Potiphar's wife desires Joseph. Alone in a foreign land, Joseph's integrity faces its greatest test. The pit prepared him for the palace. But the real challenge is yet to come. Potiphar's wife pursues Joseph, but he refuses, loyal to both Potiphar and God. "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Joseph insists. Day after day, he resists her advances, determined to remain faithful. One day, she grabs his cloak. He flees, leaving it behind. Spurned, she accuses him of assault, using the cloak as false evidence. Potiphar, enraged, throws Joseph into prison without a hearing. Once again, Joseph's integrity costs him everything. But even in the depths, his faith endures. Joseph found himself in a dungeon. This was not just a fall from grace, it was a cruel reward for doing the right thing. He had resisted temptation, honored his master, and obeyed God. And his prize was to be thrown into a dark, forgotten hole. This is a profound test of faith. It's one thing to suffer for your mistakes, but to suffer for your righteousness can feel deeply unjust and confusing. All the progress he had made, all the trust he had earned was wiped out in an instant by a lie. He was back at the bottom, lower than before. He was not just a slave, he was a disgraced slave, a prisoner accused of a terrible crime. The darkness of the prison could have easily extinguished the flame of Joseph's hope. Here there were no fields to manage or households to run. There was only stone, shadow, and the company of other prisoners. The days would have been monotonous, the future bleak. How long would he be there? Would he ever be released? Would anyone ever know the truth? These questions must have haunted him. It would have been the perfect breeding ground for bitterness to take root. He had been betrayed by his brothers and now by Potiphar's wife. He had been let down by the very people he had served faithfully. It was a long, silent, and lonely season of waiting. Yet even in this dark and desolate place, the story repeats a familiar and powerful refrain. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. God had not abandoned him in the dungeon. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Just as with Potiphar, the warden saw something special in Joseph. He saw his integrity, his reliability, and the quiet competence that flowed from his relationship with God. The blessing that followed Joseph was not dependent on his external circumstances. It was an internal reality that manifested itself wherever he went, whether in a palace or a prison. Soon the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and everything that was done in the prison. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. This is a remarkable testament to Joseph's character. He did not let his unjust circumstances define him or make him bitter. He continued to serve with excellence, stewarding his small responsibilities in the prison with the same integrity he had shown when stewarding a great household. He chose to be faithful in the waiting, trusting that even in the darkness, God was still at work, weaving a purpose he could not yet see. Life in the prison continued, and Joseph's season of waiting stretched on. Then one day the routine was broken by the arrival of two new high-profile prisoners. They were Pharaoh's own chief cupbearer and chief baker, who had offended their master and been thrown into the very same prison where Joseph was held. The captain of the guard assigned Joseph to attend to them. This seemingly small assignment was a crucial move by the unseen hand of God. It was positioning him for his purpose. God was arranging the pieces on the board for a future he had planned long ago. One morning, Joseph came to the cupbearer and the baker and saw that they were dejected. "Why do you look so sad today?" he asked. His question reveals his compassionate heart. Even as a prisoner himself, he was attentive to the suffering of others. They replied that they had both had dreams the previous night, but there was no one to interpret them. In that moment, Joseph did not point to his own ability, but immediately directed them to God. "Do not interpretations belong to God?" he said. "Tell me your dreams." He knew that the source of his gift was not himself, but the Lord he served so faithfully, even in a dungeon. The cupbearer told his dream of a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced grapes, which he then squeezed into Pharaoh's cup. Joseph, guided by God, gave the interpretation. In 3 days, Pharaoh would restore the cupbearer to his position. Then Joseph made a personal plea, "But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison," he said. "I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." He asked for justice, for someone to finally speak the truth for him. The baker, encouraged by the good interpretation, shared his dream of 3 baskets of bread on his head, which were being eaten by birds. The interpretation for him, however, was grim. In 3 days, Pharaoh would lift off his head and impale his body on a pole. Everything happened exactly as Joseph had said. 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, the cupbearer was restored and the baker was executed. Joseph's connection to God was proven true. His moment of release seemed imminent. But the chief cupbearer, now comfortable and secure back in his prestigious role, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. And Joseph was left to wait in the darkness, seemingly forgotten by both man and God. We journey to Bethlehem, home to Jesse and his 8 sons. The youngest David was a shepherd, while his impressive older brothers served as soldiers. The prophet Samuel arrived to anoint the next king. God rejected Jesse's older sons, saying, "The Lord looks at the heart." David was summoned, and God told Samuel, "This is the one." The shepherd boy was anointed, his destiny changed forever. God sees the potential within us regardless of our status. The armies of Israel and the Philistines face each other, a terrifying standoff in the valley of Elah. Every day, Goliath, a giant of a warrior, emerges to taunt the Israelites. His voice booms, challenging them to send out a warrior for single combat. For 40 days, fear paralyzes the Israelite army. Then, David, a young shepherd boy, arrives with food for his brothers. He is not intimidated by Goliath, but indignant. David sees not a giant defying an army, but a man defying God. When King Saul hears that someone is actually talking about fighting the giant, he sends for David. Picture the scene: the tall, weary king, weighed down by his heavy armor and his even heavier fear, looking down at a young shepherd boy. "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him," Saul says with a sigh of resignation. "You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." Saul sees the world through human eyes, a world of logic and military experience. He sees an impossible mismatch, a boy against a killing machine. He is looking at David's outward appearance, just as the prophet Samuel was tempted to do years before. But David's confidence does not come from his own strength or experience in battle. It comes from the private battles he has already won in the solitary fields of Bethlehem. He tells Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it and killed it." He was not just a boy with a harp, he was a fierce and courageous protector. He had faced deadly predators, not with an army at his back, but all alone with only his staff and his sling. This is where David's faith was forged. Not in a seminary or a palace, but in the wilderness, in the face of real and present danger. His lonely job as a shepherd was his training ground. It was there that he learned to rely not on his own power, but on the power of God. He connects these past victories directly to his present challenge. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear," he declares to Saul, "will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." He sees Goliath as just another predator, another wild beast that is threatening the flock of God's people. His past faithfulness has given him a powerful testimony of God's faithfulness. This is a crucial lesson in resilience. Our courage for the great public battles of our lives is often built in the small private struggles that no one else sees. It is in the daily choices to trust God, to be faithful in the small things, to face the lions and bears in our own lives, the fears, the temptations, the challenges. Each time we rely on God in those moments and see His deliverance, we are building a history of faith. We are gathering stones of remembrance that become the foundation of our courage when we are called to face the giants that stand in our own valleys of decision. Convinced, King Saul tries to help David by dressing him in royal armor. He places a bronze helmet on his head and clothes him in a heavy coat of mail, but the armor is too big and heavy. David says, "I cannot go in these because I am not used to them," so he takes them off. David refuses to fight with someone else's weapons. Instead, David turns to what he knows. He selects 5 smooth stones and places them in his shepherd's bag. With his staff and sling, he faces the giant. He is armed with his tools and unwavering trust in God. Goliath sees a shepherd, not a warrior, and curses David. David responds, "I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." It is the Lord Almighty versus an arrogant Philistine. David defeats Goliath and becomes a national hero, but this triumph plunges David into a dark valley. King Saul becomes consumed by jealousy, and David's life becomes a desperate flight. He is forced to hide in the wilderness, living as a fugitive. The anointed king now lives in desolate caves, hunted by Saul. He becomes the leader of a ragtag band of outcasts. For years, David lived on the run. It was a test of his character in the darkness. Twice, David refused to kill Saul. This period in the wilderness was crucial for shaping David's heart. It was in these dark valleys that David learned deep intimacy with God. It involved long seasons of waiting and trusting. How did David survive the wilderness? He gave us the answer in the book of Psalms. The Psalms are David's prayer journal, the raw outpourings of his heart to God. In them we see a man who is brutally honest with his Creator, bringing his whole self to God. The Psalms gave David a language for his pain, but David never stays in the pit of despair. His Psalms almost always make a turn, choosing to remember who God is. This is a conscious choice, a deliberate act of faith. He gives us permission to be honest with God. The Psalms provide us with a divine-inspired script for prayer. Our story reaches its most pivotal moment. Jesus enters Jerusalem for the final week of his life. He chose to ride on a young donkey, fulfilling prophecy. The crowds went wild, spreading cloaks and waving palm branches, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." It was a coronation. They looked for a political savior, misunderstanding the true nature of his kingship. Jesus wept, knowing their hopes were misplaced. His path led not to a throne, but to a cross. His kingdom was to be established by sacrifice. After a final meal with his disciples, Jesus went to Gethsemane. Knowing what was coming, the weight of the world's sin pressed upon him. He prayed, overwhelmed with sorrow, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me." Yet he surrendered. "Not as I will, but as you will." In the garden's darkness, Jesus chose the path of the cross. The prayer of surrender was barely finished when the garden was filled with the flicker of torches and the clang of weapons. Judas, one of his own 12 disciples, arrived with a detachment of soldiers and officials from the religious leaders. He betrayed Jesus with a kiss, a sign of friendship twisted into an act of treachery. Jesus was arrested, and his disciples, who had just promised to die for him, scattered in fear. He was led away to a series of sham trials, first before the Jewish high priest and then before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. These were not proceedings of justice. They were exercises in finding a legal excuse to execute an innocent man. Throughout these trials, Jesus' response was one of remarkable silence and dignity. False witnesses were brought forward to twist his words and accuse him of blasphemy and sedition. He was spat upon, blindfolded, and struck in the face by the guards, who mocked him, saying, "Prophesy, who hit you?" The religious leaders, men who should have recognized their own Messiah, were the ones demanding his death. Yet, when confronted with their lies and their hatred, Jesus remained largely silent. The prophet Isaiah had written centuries before, "He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth." Pilate, the Roman governor, could find no fault in him. He could see that the accusations were driven by envy. He tried to release Jesus, offering the crowd a choice between Jesus and a notorious criminal named Barabbas. But the crowd, incited by the chief priests, screamed for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be crucified. Pilate, wanting to appease the mob and avoid a riot, washed his hands in a public display of absolving himself of responsibility. He then handed Jesus over to be flogged and crucified. The flogging was a horrific torture, a brutal whipping with a lash designed to rip the flesh from a man's back, often a death sentence in itself. After the flogging, the soldiers took their turn at mockery. They twisted together a crown of thorns and pressed it onto his head. They put a staff in his hand and a purple robe on his bleeding back. Kneeling before him in mock worship, chanting, "Hail, King of the Jews," they spat on him and struck him on the head again and again with the staff. Through all this agony and humiliation Jesus endured, his strength was not in fighting back, but in absorbing the very worst of human hatred, cruelty, and injustice without retaliation. His resilience was demonstrated in his patient suffering for a purpose far greater than his own survival. Weakened, Jesus carried his cross through Jerusalem toward Golgotha. Nailed to the cross, he uttered, "Father, forgive them." Darkness fell. Bearing the weight of sin, he cried, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Knowing his work was done, Jesus declared, "It is finished." The debt cancelled, he bowed his head and gave up his life. The temple curtain tore, opening the way to God. With Jesus' final breath, a chilling silence fell over the hill. The mockery stopped. The earth shook. The Roman centurion in charge of the crucifixion, a hardened soldier who had seen countless deaths, was so shaken by what he had witnessed that he declared, "Surely this man was the Son of God." The body of Jesus was taken down from the cross by two of his followers, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, both secret disciples who were now acting with bold courage. They gently wrapped his body in linen cloths with an abundance of spices, preparing it for burial according to Jewish custom. They laid him in a new tomb, one that had been carved out of rock and had never been used before. They rolled a massive stone, weighing perhaps a ton or more, across the entrance to the tomb. This was it, the final, irreversible act. The stone sealed the tomb, a massive exclamation point on the end of a tragic story. To make sure there was no interference, the chief priests went to Pilate and requested a guard. They were afraid the disciples might come and steal the body to fake a resurrection. So Pilate assigned a squad of Roman soldiers to guard the tomb, and they sealed the great stone with the official Roman seal. To break that seal was to defy the full power of the Roman Empire. The tomb was now as secure as humanly possible. For the disciples, this was the absolute end. Their hope was not just shaken, it was dead and buried behind that giant stone. The man they had left everything to follow, the one they believed was the Messiah, the one who was going to establish a new kingdom, was gone. Their dreams were shattered. The past 3 years of their lives now seemed like a cruel delusion. They were scattered, hiding in fear behind locked doors, not just grieving, but terrified that the authorities would come for them next. The silence of that Saturday was deafening. It was a day without hope, a day when darkness seemed to have won a final decisive victory over the light. This is a feeling we can all relate to, isn't it? The feeling of the stone being rolled over our own hopes. The moment when a dream dies, a relationship ends, a diagnosis is given, or a door is slammed shut. It is the silence of the tomb, the feeling that it's all over, that there is no way forward. The story of Jesus' death and burial validates this experience. It acknowledges that there are moments in life that feel utterly final and hopeless. It allows for the reality of that silent Saturday, a day when faith is tested in the darkness, a day when all that is left is to wait, even when you don't know what you're waiting for. Before dawn, a group of women went to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body. They wondered who would move the stone. Arriving, they found the stone rolled away and the tomb empty. Angels declared, "He is risen." The women told the disciples, who disbelieved. Peter and John ran to the tomb. Seeing the neatly folded linen, John believed. The empty, orderly grave signified not robbery but resurrection. Death was defeated. The darkest hour became the most glorious dawn. We have walked a long and difficult road together on this journey. We have sat in the ashes with Job, been thrown into the pit with Joseph, and stood in the valley with David. Finally, we have stood at the foot of the cross and felt the chilling finality of the stone being rolled across the tomb. These are echoes of the human experience, stories that resonate with our own struggles, and in the story of Jesus, all these threads come together. His resurrection was the ultimate promise that death, darkness, and despair do not get the final word. Your story finds its place within this larger story of God's redemptive love. You are part of this legacy of resilience. Knowing others have endured is powerful, but how do we nurture hope when adversity hits? Think of it this way. You need an anchor and a sail. Your anchor is remembering God's faithfulness. Keep a journal, write down answered prayers, and recall moments of grace. Ground yourself in God's promises. Promises like, "I will never leave you," are your anchor points. Now for the sail. Practice honesty. Talk to God, yell, cry, ask hard questions. Find a trusted friend or counselor. Finally, practice gratitude. It shifts your focus to what you still have. An anchored, honest, and grateful heart is resilient, ready to catch the wind of hope again. From Job's ashes to the empty tomb, you are not alone. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Surely I'm with you always, to the very end of the age. You have an unseen companion on your path. Allow his power to be made perfect in your weakness. You will get through this because you do not walk it alone. He is with you now. Hold on to hope. The author of your faith will see you through to the end.